A banking bill deals with a small part of this, but not what needs to be done. We need a broad, comprehensive bill.
Can I just say something on that?
Go ahead.
I'm telling you right now, if somebody tries in the Senate to do just a banking bill, they're going to make all the wealth and the money that is going after this already is a multi-billion-dollar industry. But what could become a even bigger industry, to just do it so some people can get rich and not do something about the people who are languishing with criminal convictions, not do something on restorative justice, not do something to make sure that the business opportunities that are created are fairly given a fair playing field, where right now in many states, someone who has a criminal conviction for selling marijuana can't get a license now. I don't know about other members of the Senate, but I will lay myself down to do everything I can to stop an easy banking bill that's going to allow all these corporations to make a lot more money off of this, as opposed to focusing on the restorative justice aspects.
Well, there you go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Green Rush Live for Friday afternoon. I'm Jimmy Young with Pro Cannabis Media.
And joined always, I shouldn't say always after what happened a few weeks ago, but David Rabinovitz, and I'm glad to be back.
And we're glad you're here. We are eagerly awaiting a regular on our show, Morgan Fox from Washington, D.C., NCIA's communications director. Needless to say, David, they've been a little busy breaking down the 163-page document that has been filed to decriminalize, if not legalize, cannabis in the United States of America. There's already been some pushback on the other side of the aisle, as they say, basically saying it's never going to get done. What's your immediate reaction to what you found out as far as what is being put out there in this bill? And you know the situation in Washington, D.C., as far as the Republicans on one side, the Democrats on the other side, 50-50 in the Senate, filibusters, blah, 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 politics.
Well, you know, there's always the adage in the marijuana sector that time moves like dog years, right? A month is equal to a year, or whatever the analogies are that people happen to use. But it's going very fast right now. I think I saw something over one of my news feeds today that Ohio's looking at legalizing. The legalization effort is gaining speed at an exponential level. Look in the last few months how many states have actually legalized. It's going very quickly. So I think while the Republicans may push back on it, at some point they're going to have to realize that they may be representing a state that has legalized it. But Kurt Dalton did a wonderful summary.
Who?
Kurt Dalton.
Cannabis.net's Kurt Dalton?
On Cannabis.net, he did a great summary in an article he put together. MJ Biz had a really great breakdown. They went through all 163 pages. In fact, after reading those two articles, I didn't read them in great detail. I was going to read the whole 163 pages, and then I said, you know, maybe I don't even need to, because there's a lot of things in that bill that don't look good, and they're just poorly conceived. A 25% federal tax, just kill it out of the gate. You can make it expensive enough that you can say it's legal now, but then nobody's going to be able to sell.
Right. And the most important thing in this bill, and I think if you saw the beginning of this show, you saw Senator Cory Booker really making a great case about why this is a social justice bill more than it is any of the other details in this bill. And as we mentioned, we did expect Morgan Fox. He's never, ever disappointed us. And he joins us now live from Washington, D.C. He is the communications director of the NCIA. Earlier this week, I got a chance to talk to Michael Correa, who's the lead lobbyist and the head of the governmental relations. Needless to say, Morgan, have you guys spent the last 48 hours breaking down this 163-page document?
Yes, we have, and it's going to take a lot longer than that to really get into all of the details. We're also reaching out to our members and various stakeholders to get their input as well, so that we can submit comments in time to make sure that this bill is the best bill that it can possibly be.
Hey, Morgan, what's that?
Right.
Tell us about the new hat you've got on here.
Oh, this is a hat from my softball team, sponsored by an amazing organization in the DC area, Tacoma Wellness Center. They are a medical cannabis dispensary in the DC area and have been just great about sponsoring our softball team over the last few years.
Interesting, David. I don't think cannabis companies in Massachusetts can sponsor softball teams.
I'm not sure about that.
I don't think they can. They have such limited marketing, and actually, that's a great segue, because the rest of this show, we're going to be talking about state politics in New Hampshire. We're going to be talking about billboards and the use of people's likeness on a billboard. As you might know, a Massachusetts dispensary was sued this week by Sacha Baron Cohen's legal team for using his likeness in his Borat character. And we covered that in our We Talk News, as always. That show will follow this one at 6 p.m. Eastern time. But now let's get back to this bill. Morgan, while David admits he's done a little bit more homework on this than I have, but I looked at the entire news conference that Senators Schumer, Booker, and Wyden held the other day. We're going to be using excerpts from it throughout the show. We led the show off with Senator Booker talking about the importance of it as a social justice bill more than anything else. David immediately goes to the bottom line, 25% tax. Well, we can't have that. There are still elements in this bill that I believe will eventually move the needle forward. I don't know if you go in and expect everything. How do you guys decide what you're going to go for and what you don't?
Well, I mean, I think it's important overall to really look at this bill and see it for what it is, which is probably the most well-considered and well-thought-out cannabis descheduling bill that we've seen so far. Obviously, there are some things that probably need to get improved and some things that might need to get stripped out, but it's an excellent starting place, not only to, because there's so much emphasis on social justice, but there's also a much more robust regulatory structure, and we haven't seen that in other bills previously. And this is a great way to really start the conversation and be able to find areas of common ground across party lines, find where the sticking points are politically, and just go from there. The problem that I had with that press conference, which I'm sure that you covered with Mike previously, was the insinuation that comprehensive cannabis policy reform is mutually exclusive with incremental reform, and it absolutely is not. So that's something that we're going to be working on with lawmakers as well over the coming months.
So what you're saying, because Cory Booker got really upset when a question in that news conference related to the Safe Banking Act, and basically saying, we don't need the Safe Banking Act. We need the whole enchilada. It's time. I mean, he was pretty pissed, to be honest.
I mean, we do need the whole enchilada. That is not in question. What is in question is when. And, when we clearly do not yet have the votes for comprehensive descheduling, particularly comprehensive descheduling that includes the sort of robust reparative and social justice provisions that we need to see happen in such a bill. But we do have the votes for incremental reforms like safe banking that will have an immediate positive effect primarily on small and minority owned businesses. There's no reason to be throwing these incremental reforms under the bus and closing the doors on it. I mean, when it comes right down to it, big businesses and MSOs already have access to banking. They already have access to capital. When you look at social equity businesses, their number one concern is access to capital and barriers to entry, such as the high costs and problems associated with not having banking issues. So the longer that we delay a narrowly tailored incremental reform like that, that just basically creates more opportunity for larger operators to cement their market position while small businesses continue to struggle and fail. And, clearly we want the same thing. But if we have the votes for something incremental, then we should absolutely pursue that along the lines, along with these more broad bills, so that we can help move the Overton window for comprehensive reforms farther along, but not leave small and minority-owned businesses behind. And there's I think a certain subsect of Democratic lawmakers that think that incremental reforms being passed will take the wind out of the sails of more broad reforms. And, we've seen historically in cannabis policy reform that that's just not the case. Every time an incremental reform bill passes and we can get somebody to vote on it, it makes it that much easier for that person to vote in favor of something that's more comprehensive. And, these things are not mutually exclusive. We can pursue them both.
Well, it sounds like you guys are going to be really busy for sure, because I think there's a lot of selling to be done in the halls of the Capitol. Just for yucks and giggles, I decided to check out the other side, okay? Because I think a lot of people think a lot of people know, let me rephrase that I lean to the left side, okay? So I decided to read this right side review of the bill by a Kevin Williamson, headline, the marijuana reform we need, and then subheadline, and why we won't get it. He gave you two reasons, Republicans and Democrats. Michael mentioned this as well. That current situation that is in DC is unlike anything in my lifetime I've ever seen this divided. Maybe the 60s with the pro-war and anti-war, the doves and the hawks. But this is a time where people have to look at the broad picture, the big picture, and say, what can you live with? So, and David, you do more negotiations, certainly more successful ones than I have. And when you go into a negotiation, when you're looking to sell something, you go in with everything, and then you end up perhaps settling on something you can live with. Is that an accurate way of how the lobbying process works?
Well, everything is compromise, and politics is really just the art of the possible. So conversations around this are going to be ongoing. And when it comes to comprehensive reform, clearly members of the GOP have issues with, the federal regulatory structure and I hate to say this, but a big sticking point is on like the restorative justice provisions, which I think, and I've mentioned before, Republicans are going to have to answer for at some point. But right now, I think that this bill really just embodies a good discussion point to kind of figure out where everybody is. But we are going to need to get past partisan rancor. And when you're talking purely politics, this is an issue that is broadly supported, but not very deeply supported by most voters. So, it's a clear win that would carry no serious backlash against any lawmakers on either side of the aisle for supporting. But I don't think that many of them are too worried that if they don't get something like this passed, that they're going to feel too much backlash in terms of reelection. So, it's the jobs of, activists and advocates to change their minds about that and to make sure that voters actually will hold them accountable for the decisions that they make or the inaction that they show on this issue. But when you come down to it, we're looking at a very short window before a potential change in control of both chambers of Congress, where because demographically Republicans tend to support this issue, at least among lawmakers, much less than Democrats, and really among voters, slightly less than Democrats. So we have until about the midterms to really get something substantive passed. At that point, if voters see that Democrats are unable to compromise on even something that's broadly supported, I think that there's going to be a serious effect on that, and it will endanger their ability to maintain control of either chamber. And if they lose control of one or both chambers, that is definitely going to slow down progress for comprehensive as well as incremental cannabis policy reform.
Michael, enlighten me. There's actually a public comment period between now and September 1st. I'm going to try and remember what the email is, but I'm pretty sure it's cannabis_reform at senate.finance.gov. Did I get it right?
I'm not sure, honestly. We're
Send an email.
primarily
It didn't bounce. I sent one. It didn't bounce. That's the one you're supposed to send it to. And it's in our news show, too. So I'm sorry I put you on the spot there, pal.
Oh no, it's quite all right. But I mean, we're not ready to offer our opinions and analysis of it just yet. We want to be very thoughtful about it, just like the sponsors of the bill were very thoughtful and considerate when they were putting it together. And we want to engage as many of our members and stakeholders as possible before we start, giving our opinion on the details of the bill. Like I said, overall, it's looks pretty solid. There are definitely going to be some things that need to get changed. Just if you're looking at it historically, this is the first time that Senate Majority leadership has not only supported but sponsored something like this. So it's clearly a signifier of how far we've come over the last 5-10 years, and it really is just a matter of working out the details and making sure that lawmakers actually do what's best for their constituents.
We haven't had a chance to talk because we took a couple of weeks off for vacation, just time off. Judge Clarence Thomas threw out a written rant, I guess that would be, right? And social media would probably be on video and they call it a rant. This was a 5-page opinion, and he called the federal federal laws as contradictory and unstable. Does that help going into the lobbying phase here of this bill?
I mean, rhetorically and symbolically, it absolutely does help. In terms of practicality, it would only help if the Supreme Court would take up cases related to cannabis policy, and they've been denying them sort of certiorari for the last couple of years. I believe probably because they figured the matter is settled after the Gonzalez v. Raich case in I want to say 2005.
2005.
David knows. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I think that most of them view the case matter as pretty much solved under the Commerce Clause, but the fact that a conservative justice is pointing out and taking the time out of his day to object to the status quo, I think symbolically is very important. In terms of what sort of an impact that can have, clearly it's good for rhetorical purposes. But for practical purposes, unless the Supreme Court actually takes up a case involving these issues, we're not going to see any direct impact.
Bear something. I want to add something in on that. In Justice Thomas's comments, he didn't reference the Gonzalez versus Raich case directly, but he said, a lot has changed since 2005, and that was the case he was talking about.
Right.
Like, that was a woman growing a bunch of plants in her house because the doctor told her to. Butte County Sheriff showed up along with the DEA. The sheriffs looked at her paperwork and said, "We're leaving." And the DEA said, "We ain't." And they confiscated her plants.
Yeah, and I mean, the ruling of that case was based on an interpretation of Commerce Clause that has been upheld in judicial precedent since, I believe, 1942 in like the Wickard v. Vilburn wheat case. And so I think that the rulings that case was based on are probably not going to get overturned in any sense. But a creatively worded case challenging federal prohibition, I think, could potentially make it to the Supreme Court, provided that it's being done on grounds that haven't already been covered by existing precedent. That being said, I don't know if any such case would be able to make it to the Supreme Court before Congress actually deals with this issue, but it's totally worth a try.
Now, David is a scholar on the history of cannabis in this country. I've heard him speak before. He's, critically acclaimed historian. Walk us through, because I don't think a lot of people know this, David, the Timothy Leary story from 1969 that ended up with a unanimous Supreme Court decision basically saying that Marijuana Act of 1937 was unconstitutional. Walk us through the history of this, David. It's fascinating.
So Timothy Leary, the tune
Wait, hang on. Morgan, you know this story, I hope, right?
I do. I don't know too many of the details about it because that was the shutdown of the Marijuana Tax Act, but was immediately followed by the passage of the Controlled Substances Act.
Exactly right.
rule?
69 and 73. Just for the record, I was 12 and 15. Okay, go ahead, David.
All right. So I think it's the Rolling Stones at one of their songs. They say something about truth is always strange.
Larry's dead. Go ahead.
What's that?
I just sang the song,
Oh, okay.
but I want you to do the Supreme Court thing because I really think
Okay.
a lot of
Let
people
me know
don't
when,
know
because
the
it's
history.
4:19.
Go ahead.
We got people in the chat that are they're packing their bowls and rolling their joints now for 420.
That's right.
So here's the readers, the highly condensed version. Timothy Leary, Harvard-trained psychologist, believes you can use LSD for therapeutic purposes. He's Mr. Tune in, turn on, and drop out. Decides he's taking his family on vacation. They're going to go down to Mexico. Well, they have a couple of joints in the bag. Not a big deal. They go past the border in Texas. They get to the Mexican side of the border, and their paperwork's not right. Mexicans tell them, sorry, you can't come in. They turn the car around, they drive back. The border guards in the US say, we got to check your bags. He says, no, you don't understand. We didn't go to Mexico. We just came through here. We went down, they turned us back. And the border guard says, we got to check your bags. He says, no. He says, we got to check your bags, sir. You went through, you want to come back, we check your bags. In the bags, they find a couple of joints. He gets arrested. He loses the case, appeals, loses the case. Remember, he's a Harvard psychologist, which means he's got money, right? He appeals it all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. And in May of 1969, his argument is pretty good. He says, look, marijuana is illegal in some states. In order to get the tax stamp, which I could readily get through the government under the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act, I have to acknowledge that I have possession of marijuana, which is illegal. And that would incriminate my Fifth Amendment right. So under the Fifth Amendment, this whole law should be thrown out. And in fact, that's what SCOTUS came down in May of 1969 in a unanimous decision, ruled the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act was illegal, whereupon marijuana was no longer illegal at the federal level. And then Nixon responded with the Comprehensive Drug, whatever it is, Act, including the controlled part of it was a Controlled Substance Act. But there was that short window where you could probably smoke pot in Washington, D.C. and get away with it.
Isn't that, now Morgan, I told you he knew all the details. I don't know if he hung out with Timothy Leary or not. But when you think about that, isn't there a great screenplay out there somehow that you just take away the Nixon White House and you live with legal cannabis in 1969? What would we be
like
looking
a speculative
like
history picture?
What's that?
Like a speculative history picture?
Yeah. You know, I love hearing David talk about that story because, you know, I lived through it. I remember it as a child, but looking back in history now, it's like we really screwed this up. And I mean, we being a humanity, Americans, if you will. And now we have to go through this rigmarole.
Nixon really screwed it up. I mean, such a movie I think would probably be mostly interesting to policy nerds like us, but you know, it is pretty fascinating when you dive into the details and the interplay of that. I mean, even you know, before and past, you know, all of the different legal challenges that have come up against not only the Controlled Substances Act, but even at the state level against certain prohibition policies. You know, it's really amazing that this edifice that is clearly harmful to the American people and clearly harmful to individuals and clearly harmful to liberty and you know, economic stability has managed to survive so many legal challenges over the years.
Well, how about the challenges within the federal government? You got the politicians saying pot is no good. And Nixon decides, I am going to put the final nail in the coffin on this thing. He gets marijuana policy is going to be handled by the Department of Justice and not the Health and Human Services. Then he says, we're going to put the final nail in the coffin. The former governor of Pennsylvania, Ray Schaefer, wants an appointment to the federal bench. And Nixon says to him, I'm going to get you your appointment onto the federal bench. You're going to give me a study that is going to be exhaustive, and it is going to prove marijuana is the demon we say it is. The Schaefer report came out a year later. They had a staff of 73 people. They went around the country, conducted like 50 studies, millions of dollars. It was such a big deal. It was turned into a book, kind of like what happened with the Mueller report. And what did he conclude? Ray Schaefer said, marijuana is basically a joke. We shouldn't spend our time on it. It should not be rescheduled. It should be descheduled. And frankly, for casual sales between private parties, we should just ignore it. It's not a big deal. Nixon buried the report. Schaefer never made it to the federal bench, and marijuana remained illegal to this day.
He didn't just bury the report. I mean, angrily threw it in the trash and was fuming about it.
Yeah.
I believe he took down the hippies and another term that I don't like to use. Anyway, that being said, we don't have to worry about that president anymore. We have enough dealing with what we've got to deal with now. What about the president himself, Joe Biden? I know that he knows, everybody sees him as an anti-drug guy. And, is there room in his brain for compromise to move this forward? Do you think that exists?
I do. I mean, I honestly, he's clearly not going to spearhead this issue. He's not going to be an overt supporter of it. But given the popularity among both his party and among the American people, I don't see him vetoing a bill, particularly if it includes really robust social justice and restorative justice measures. Maybe he would repeal something that was passed by a Republican Congress, like the Joyce bill, which is a pretty stripped down descheduling bill. But in terms of something that came forward from his own party and was able to get enough votes from Republicans to actually show that the parties can compromise, I couldn't imagine him vetoing it.
Right. Restorative justice and expungement versus descheduling. Which is the one you could live with? That's not fair.
Well,
which is the more important?
In both cases.
What's that?
We need descheduling in both cases.
Right.
Rescheduling or simple states' rights allowances is not going to be enough. I mean, we absolutely need cannabis to be removed from the schedule of controlled substances so that it can be effectively regulated to whatever degree lawmakers really are willing to tolerate. But the real big sticking point is, what are we going to do to repair the harms caused by the last 40 years of the war on drugs, last 50 years, even going farther back? And that's something that Democrats are broadly supportive of. It's something that we are broadly supportive of. And if some bill comes across the desk of the president during his term that doesn't contain those, I could see some pushback and be like a conditional veto where I'm going to veto this unless you include X, Y, and Z. But for something that does include really robust measures along those lines, I don't see a veto in the cards.
I'm pretty sure that they put the jurisdiction over the cannabis legalization market into the Food and Drug Administration as opposed to the Justice. That seems to be a no-brainer to me.
Well, it's divided up in the draft language between the Food and Drug Administration, the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, and the ATF. So the FDA and the TTB would be in charge of a lot of the regulatory stuff and being in charge of federal licensing and setting all the rules that help guide states, but also that in some cases states have to follow, or at least businesses operating in legal states have to follow. And then the ATF would apparently be in charge of everything outside of that license sphere. I haven't gotten a chance to get to the details of that particular section of the bill yet. I mean, as you said, it's like 160 pages and we're going line by line. But in the summary of the bill, the exact role of the ATF was not really effectively spelled out. So I think that's something that we're definitely going to be looking at, because we do want to minimize or eliminate the role of law enforcement in this area, unless absolutely necessary, or only under the most dire of circumstances, or in situations that are involving violence or organized crime. So it's going to be really important to make sure that the ATF has as small a role as possible when it comes to both enforcement as well as regulation.
Yeah, maybe they should just have a vice division and leave the Food Administration alone. Just saying, it might be a good time to blow up the bureaucracy and start over with all the vices that are out there.
Why should
anyway.
ATF have all the fun?
What's that?
Why should ATF have all the fun?
Right. Exactly. Hey, we blew right through 420, Morgan. So I appreciate you hanging out with us for a few extra minutes to talk about the seriousness of this, the historical perspective in it. And as always, we appreciate your regular contributions to this show. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me again.
All right. And since we are going to take our regular break a little bit later, we're going to continue to show excerpts from that news conference. And then when we come back, we're going to have a whole new panel, and we're going to talk about what's going on in the state of New Hampshire with a couple of very important political people in that state. We'll be back with more of the Green Rush Live after this. Don't go away.
This is a historic day that these two leaders are going to put their will and their work and all of their heart behind this justice bill. I had a press conference with families of children who had something called Gervais syndrome, which is seizures. The brave young girl sitting in a wheelchair had over, at times, 100 a day. And her mother was what you call a marijuana refugee because it was illegal in her state, so she moved to a state where marijuana had been legalized at the state level, but she talked about the fact that she was still violating federal law and that she could be prosecuted, that the person that was providing it could be prosecuted, that universities couldn't study marijuana to get the dosage right for her child. During that press conference, her child fell into a seizure. To this day, it's still one of the most moving moments of my Senate career. That we have criminalized Americans, and now some people, for trying to help their child, and now some people are probably wondering, well, people aren't getting arrested anymore for possession of marijuana. Well, I'll tell you right now, I saw it when Jeff Sessions became the Attorney General and said he would restart prosecutions. I see it now in the facts all around our country. In 2019, there were more marijuana arrests than all other violent crime arrests combined. And the majority of those were for simple possession. This is a grievous reality. Lives are being destroyed every single day. And the hypocrisy of this is that right here in the Capitol, now people running for Congress, people running for Senate, people running for President of the United States readily admit that they've used marijuana. But we have children in this country, people all over this nation, are veterans, black and brown people, low-income people, now bearing the stain of having a criminal conviction for doing things that half of the last 4 presidents admitted to doing. We are in the midst of a grievous moment of injustice, and it is deep at the core of who we say we are, equal justice under law. And so we have waited too long. We've seen the disaster of prohibition once before in this nation. This is hurting every American, and I end with this fact. Law enforcement resources all over this country are desperately needed to solve crimes that are hurting other Americans, theft and larceny and assault, sexual assault, and other violence. But yet, instead, we have our precious resources being used to lock up majority black and brown people for doing things that presidents and congresspeople and senators have done. This bill is urgent. This bill is long past due. And I am proud that today we are making history by having the 2 champions on either side of me leading this fight to finally end the war on drugs, which, as Senator Schumer said, has been a war on people, to end prohibition once and for all for marijuana.
Hi, I'm Ben Shower, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
Live. I'm Jimmy Young with Pro Cannabis Media, and I'm always joined by my pal, David Rabinovitz. Say hi, David.
Hi, David.
There you go. Very good. He's very good at that. And I can turn to another friend who's in our panel of distinguished people from New Hampshire. He's a representative up there. He's a good friend. His name is Tim Egan. Tim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Jimmy, it's a pleasure to join you today. I hope you can hear me okay. Just making sure I sound okay.
You sound fine, Tim. And New Hampshire is one of the few states in New England that doesn't have an adult use legalization plan, platform open. You guys are in the trenches of politics in your state of New Hampshire. Tim, introduce this, the field, the guys that you have in the panel in our Zoom call today. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jimmy. Yeah, I am actually a member of the House of Representatives representing Sugar Hill and the 5 towns around there. My colleague across the aisle, Ross Berry, represents Manchester area, and Daryl Eames is the head of the New Hampshire Cannabis Trade Association. And we've been trying to put our heads together to try and look at how do we get industry left, right, and center all to come together to talk about how we get off that list of one of the only 2 states in New England, because we understand that it's got a variety of values to our state.
Absolutely. And Ross, I think Tim referred to you as a friend from the other side of the aisle. You know how we are right now with our political agenda in Washington, D.C., with that division between Republicans and Democrats. And I just wonder, why New Hampshire? Why are you guys actually talking to each other as opposed to saying, well, whatever you say, I'm going to say the opposite?
Well, that speaks to the New Hampshire form of government. We have 400 state representatives. So we have one of the largest elected body outside of Congress, and I think like some parliament somewhere. But because of that, state representatives, we're closest to the people. So we get paid $100 a year. We're volunteers. There's no limelight, there's no glory in this. But when you look at the issue of legalization of cannabis in New Hampshire, it traditionally has not been a partisan issue, at least in the last 6 years since I've been watching it. It's traditionally been a House versus Senate versus governor debate. And the House has passed it before with the supermajority from both parties. So, you get people on both sides of the aisle who oppose it, but they're in a very small minority right now. And the overwhelming majority of us want to legalize it. The question is how and what is the path forward to get that done?
And Daryl, as a gentleman who represents industry, what is your role as far as this goes, as far as making it work for a new industry in New Hampshire, if and when we ever get to the point where you have a adult use legalization program?
Right. Well, I think one of the most important things to remember is that, at some point, all of these states are going to be in the situation where you've got cross-state competition. And so the association really is about making sure that when the day comes that we get adult rec, that we're building strong companies with strong brands. They're going to be able to withstand that level of competition. And so, we're all about supporting, connecting, educating, and organizing the industry. And we're here to be an asset for the legislators that are really pushing for legalization in the state.
Tim, walk us through the progress. Where are you guys at with this charge?
Well, we're making a lot of progress. First of all, the idea that my minority leader, Rennie Cushing, said to me, I want you to move this legislation forward. You understand the industry. He actually spoke at an event. Actually, Jimmy, I think you've met him at a Cannabis Certification Council event a couple of years back when we actually had physical events.
On the cannabis feed. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. And he he said to me, you understand it from a social justice area, you understand it from a business area, you understand it from a governance area. And then I had the pleasure in working through some really good pieces of legislation that bipartisan we passed in the House to get to know Ross Berry and say, you know what, we're coming at this from the same place. We don't want big corporations taking things over. We want to allow people their rights to be able to grow, to start small businesses, to be able to offer a product that is being offered in, 4 of the 6 other New England states. So how can we work together? So that started earlier this term. I know there's been some other legislation that's been filed in the past from Democrats and Republicans equally. So that's happened in the past year or two. So we're now trying to see what really boils down to what can we get passed. As I think Ross referenced, the idea has been the Senate, which maybe skews a little older than the House, has been hesitant. And unfortunately, the governor has been quite hesitant. And I think knowing that industry and Republicans see something the same as Democrats, it may open his eyes in the next coming year. So the plan is to literally start talking about what can we get passed and take a look at that. And that's sort of why I wanted these 2 gentlemen to be part of this call, because they're part of an essential ground foundation of people that care about this industry, understand this industry, and want to move it forward for our residents of New Hampshire.
Ross, as you know, the senators, the U.S. Senate just introduced a pretty comprehensive bill that they'd like to see passed. I don't think any of us in this room think that you'll see this bill passed in its current state. I think we can go out on a limb there and say that. That being said, when you are in the trenches and you're talking to opposition, how do you guys find common ground? Is it social justice? Is that what's driving this more than anything else?
I mean, that could be for Tim's side. For my side, it's a freedom issue. Everyone's an adult and they get to make decisions to what they want to do. And I think that's a big one. I'll give you an example where I actually thought we weren't going to have common ground in New Hampshire. I said initially, a big thing for me is there's a push to put the cannabis in New Hampshire state-run liquor stores. And that's a non-starter for me. And I was actually surprised that Tim's side agreed on that. We probably come at it from a little different perspectives. For me, it was, I didn't want to create just all these new government employees because I am a Republican, I am a conservative, I do believe in limited government. And Tim came at it from a social justice point of view. And it turns out we had another thing in common, which I told Tim, I wanted to limit the number of licenses an individual could hold, not the number of licenses, but a number of licenses an individual could hold to stop, Pot Inc. or a large corporation coming in and monopolizing the industry right off the bat because they have easy access to capital. And one of the things we found an overlap on is, we both wanted to create a new generation of business owners. And I view this as a really easy way to level the playing field, especially if I'm 31 years old, I'm a millennial. I view this as a really easy way to level the playing field on the retail side by having a low barrier to entry regulated industry, brand new, that older Americans by and large won't participate in.
And Jimmy, let me just jump in. As a Democrat, I'm a blue dog Democrat. I'm a business guy. You've known me for 30 years and I've run production companies. I've run films projects. I'm an economics guy. So I see that if you have small businesses and you have small shops and you have small grow facilities, then you're able to create an industry around the state. And when I met Daryl and I started talking like that, I think he was like pleasantly surprised, right, Daryl?
Absolutely.
So besides the tax advantages for municipalities, Daryl, how do you sell this into your community?
Well, it's very easy. I mean, people don't realize that this industry touches almost everything from, manufacturing and agriculture to warehousing and distribution to seeds and science and laboratories and you name it. And, this is an opportunity, I think, to take a new industry and really be able to have certain communities benefit that may have, less economic opportunity currently. There are buildings sitting empty that could be utilized for these businesses. There are jobs that could be created. It's so much more than just the tax implications. And quite frankly, whether you're talking about the business side of it or the medical benefits of it, each of those could be a 4-hour podcast. But, the economic opportunity here and the ability to really spread that throughout the state of New Hampshire, I think is something that's incredibly attractive. And I think both sides of the aisle and the political class agree, really.
Well, I like the fact that you guys seem to actually understand that you're all on the same state team. I'm not sure our federal elected officials feel that same way because of how bipartisan everybody is. I mean, we're not going to evolve as a humanity or even as a country unless we figure out a way to actually communicate to each other and find common ground. Call me an idealist, call me whatever names you want. I think that's half the problem with our world right now, is that every single word you use, you have an image of it.
Right.
And
well, I think
that way, hang on a second. I got one more point to make because I made a blog about that. But if I say the word American, what does that look like?
All of us on this podcast.
Good.
And that's the point that I was going to drive down. I apologize for interrupting you. Daryl and Ross and I'm not going to, pat myself too hard on the back, but we're smart guys. And we see that we want the best for New Hampshire. And when I begin to see people leave New Hampshire and spend their money in Maine, Mass, and soon Vermont in stores, we're losing revenue. When I see people start to make traveling decisions going, hey, I'm going to come from somewhere else in the state where cannabis isn't legal, and I'm going to choose to go hiking, snowboarding, skiing, whatever. And that's maybe part of my culture. I enjoy cannabis versus alcohol or cigarettes. I'm going to go to upstate New York. I'm going to go to Vermont. I'm going to go to Maine. I'm going to go to Western Mass. I'm worried about it as a tourism issue. And if tourism is a $6 billion industry here, the number 2 revenue generator in the state of New Hampshire, why are we ignoring this? And so what it's going to take are smart, somewhat maybe not polite people like us who are going to be a little loud. What's that phrase in America? The squeaky wheel gets the grease. Well, it's time for a collective of folks that are representing all of it to be a little squeaky. And I think to Daryl's point about, the economics, and I'd love to hear Ross's point, because we haven't really gotten into this side of the conversation. I live in the North Country. There's nothing up here. We get maybe a little bit of manufacturing, we get logging. If you're looking at the North Country, New Hampshire, Coas and Grafton County, and they're predominantly banking on tourism. Well, if you can add cannabis as part of that tourism, I'm going to go, how many people have gone to a brewery tour? How many people have gone to, a brewery with a big patio? Why can't you have that in the cannabis industry in the North Country of New Hampshire, or down at the beaches area, or down in the southern, southwestern part of the state, in the Keene area? I mean, that's where I see the economic potential for our state. And the last point before I'll hog all the air is it's an economic issue, right? This is a revenue generating issue. And if we're going to create small businesses, small entrepreneurs, and drive people to certain parts of the state that haven't been getting the love and attention, that's our job in the House from an economics point of view. When I think about legislatively things that tie to economic development, this is one of them.
He is pretty smart for a guy who's won. How many Emmys, Tim? How many Emmys?
I got 2. I'm proud. 2 Emmys.
I have none. Got work to do.
Yeah, my friend Jimmy has a couple too.
Actually, I've got more nominations than I have trophies, but that's
You're the
okay.
Susan Lucci of nominations.
That's right. I don't have a problem with that. Okay, I do not have a problem with that. 8 times
You
nominated, whatever. I'm very happy with that. I think it's because the category says produces Emmy nominated, Emmy award worthy, Emmy award worthy of an Emmy award is what I'm doing. So anyway, and by the way, you guys know, while we know that there was history in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday and all this, as far as we know, this is the only live streamed talk show on cannabis business that we've been able to find in this country. We do it every Friday from 4 to 6. And the guy to my my quadrant there, my sidekick, David, does a great job when you ask him anything about history of cannabis or business. So I'm filling here because he knows I'm going to come to him now with a question that I'd like to see if he could pick something that he may have heard from New Hampshire and come up with a question for you guys. David?
Oh, I've got a great one. So this one's for Daryl. Daryl, Robbie's up watching us, and he's in our YouTube feed. And he'd like to know, how is the association organizing businesses in New Hampshire, and how can one get involved?
Absolutely. So we kicked off this year with hosting some networking group, which is a little bit different than the normal ones that I've run, but it's definitely a mix, I think, of both proponents and people operating in the industry. You might be surprised to know this, but just because we don't have adult recreation does not mean that we have entrepreneurs and businesses that are operating within the industry in the United States. We've got accountants, we've got labs, we've got finance companies like the one that I run. And so every month we're doing networking meetings. We started in the Manchester, New Hampshire area. We now have one in the North Country in Littleton, and we will soon be launching one in Nashua with eyes towards Portsmouth and points west as well. So if you go to New Hampshire Can with 2Ns.org and you go into the blog news or events, you'll be able to see when those are going to be scheduled. We're also on Facebook and some other social media, but the website's the best place. And then you can contact us to get information on the chapter that you want to join and the meeting locations and times.
There you go. Good. Anybody else in that chat room, David, you want to throw in here?
A lot of people in that chat room, including one of our 5 o'clock guests, but
oh, good.
No other questions so far.
And if we could, I want to throw out a question to the chat room. Okay. If you had to pick one thing to change in the United States policy when it comes to cannabis illegalization, what is the one thing you'd like to see? What's the most important thing for you to see in federal legalization? And now I'm going to come back to Tim and say, Tim, at the state level, is it just go ahead.
It's the perfect question, because this is what brought Ross and I together. So I'm going to let him answer it.
All right, go ahead, Ross.
I mean, for me, the most important thing is going to be the tax revenue side of it, and what that looks like. And I imagine we'll have some disagreement over exactly how that looks like. And I want to give a quick little background on the reason for that. New Hampshire is a notoriously low tax state. And we are the lowest tax state in New England, and we're very proud of that. We have no sales tax, we have no income tax. And we have a very, very low tax on comparable goods. So alcohol and tobacco, which by the way, are way worse for you than cannabis, just as an aside. We have one of the lowest alcohol and tobacco tax rates in the region and in the country. And people come from all over the region to buy our alcohol. And we actually have limits on cartons of cigarettes, or how many you're allowed to buy, because so many people come here to buy them. I would like to see that for New Hampshire, where instead of Massachusetts eating our lunch like they are right now, where all of our users are going down there, all of our citizens are going down there and buying it from them. I want to see the New Hampshire people buying it from New Hampshire, the Massachusetts people buying from New Hampshire, Vermont buying from New Hampshire, Maine buying from New Hampshire, because we have the cheapest product and the best product, just as an aside, but the cheapest.
Most efficient and economic product. All right, well, that's a good goal. I will say this about your state-run liquor stores. Costco's better. That being said,
it is.
Just for my own bottle of wine, I went and I looked for a very special bottle of wine, and we know the price at Costco, and we went to the liquor store last week. How does the state liquor store work, and is there a model there that can be applied to the cannabis industry? Who wants to handle that?
I can do it if you want, Tim.
Please.
I don't want to see that model applied for a variety of reasons. One of which is those employees are state employees, but there's people that work in those liquor stores who are not comfortable dealing with cannabis. So I wouldn't want to put something on them that they didn't sign up for. I don't think that's right. I think if we're going to look at a model that we should be for how to roll this out in New Hampshire, I think the way that the state rolled out Keno actually worked out really well. And Tim can kind of touch on this, but basically we introduced this kind of low-level form of gambling, but we let communities opt in, and that helped pass it. And I think we'll have to look at something like that, where it says, all right, not every community is going to want this, and we are a local control state, but certain communities, I'm sure Manchester will pass it in 5 seconds. I have no doubt that it'll go into Keene, but I think we're going to have to do something like that to kind of grease the wheel to make sure we have the numbers in the house.
Yeah, and I think another interesting part is when he talked about the comfort level. Liquor has been around forever, so people sort of understand what kind of liquor they want when they go into a liquor store. Cannabis is a specialty item that needs to have professionals offer it to you. And I think, but if you've been into cannabis stores, and I have in Colorado and California and Maine and Massachusetts, that you want someone that knows. It's like you don't go to a auto repair shop for a guy that fixes bicycles. So you want to have somebody specialty. And I think that's why the model of state run doesn't work. as well, I think I'm sort of an entrepreneur. So I think state-run anything hurts entrepreneurism. And that's another part of it. And then that ties back into what Ross was talking about. That allows for communities to say, you know what, we want that in our region, because like up here in the North Country, there's a famous concert called Jerry Jam. Just by saying that, you understand the culture of my community. So northern Grafton County, lower cost county is going to have towns that are, people are comfortable with adult use and will want to have stores, and that's an important part. So mixing those two things together says, let's figure out how we pass something that allows small businesses to grow, allows adult users to have it, maybe grow a couple of plants if they want, similar to Vermont or Maine's early model of 6 plants. But then, we're sort of in this, I don't want to say baby steps, but I think it's time for the baby to stop crawling and start walking. And that's why the three of us wanted to talk with you, because we're trying to figure out how to put our heads together to get those steps.
Well, it's a perfect storm right now. You've got federal legalization being filed at the US Senate for the first time. You've got people coming out of a pandemic and they've been shut down, and they've seen that now cannabis has become an essential item in a lot of the other states. You're surrounded by friendly cannabis states. It seems like there's now a perfect storm and opportunity here. The question I'm going to ask you guys has to do with, and of course, you're not doing this for the money, that's for sure, Russ. $100, I get that. You take that right out of the equation, okay? So getting reelected, is that high? In other words, what I'm seeing in Washington, D.C. is they're more concerned about keeping their seat, getting reelected, than listening to their constituency to get things done. That's what bothers me. I don't hear that coming from you guys.
Well, to touch on that, legalization of cannabis is extraordinarily popular in New Hampshire. I was actually looking at the polling earlier today. I can rattle off some numbers because I'm a polls guy here. But 87% of Democrats approve of sale and tax of marijuana at licensed retail outlets. 83% of independents, 67 are over 2 out of 3 of Republicans. 78% overall. So in terms of getting reelected, this is actually kind of one of the best things you can do if you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, or you're an independent. This is like the path. The people have spoken, and it's time to do what they want.
Yeah, I saw a poll last year that had cannabis with a better approval rating than Governor Sununu and Senator Shaheen and Senator Hassan. So what's next? It's time for us to do work. And when you were able to do that, that's when you're able to do that kind of work and provide for legislation that helps people, then they go, hey, that's the kind of guy I want to reelect, or that's the kind of gal I want to reelect.
I'd say when
you guys, I'm sorry, go ahead, Daryl.
I was just going to say, when 75% of your electorate is for legalization of adult use, I think maybe it's time for the political class to take notice.
Yeah, either that, or it's time for that 75% to begin to vote out of office the folks who are blocking it. Maybe what New Hampshire should do, and Ross, I know this is not going to be good for you, but why don't you guys come down to Massachusetts? We'll hook you up with some growers. You make a 5-foot-long joint, put a couple of arms on it, and see if you can run that thing for governor.
State police might have something to say about that. But
one last question for you guys, because I heard the name Shaheen, and it didn't come from this conversation, even though I heard it here. It came from Michael Correa, the lead lobbyist for the NCIA, who is concerned about her. Given the overwhelming polling now that you've just reported, how in the world can she have any vote any other way on this? Guys, I bet you feel the same way.
Well,
I'll let Tim go on that one.
Yeah, well, federally, candidly, Jimmy, I'm not focused on federally. If I had my wishes, I'd like it to be descheduled, and then it allows states' rights and it allows states to create an economy. I think we're a long way off from national legalization, right? But so it's not a federal issue. I think if our senators and our Congress folks and even our governor want to be reelected, they're going to have to listen to that 75% electorate and say, you know what, I'm going to have to let things happen in the state that happen in the state being created by legislation, by legislators who manage the state. That's Ross and I and, Speaker Sherm Packard and Minority Leader Rennie Cushing. and folks that actually take time to put their divides aside and go, wait, where are common ground that we can work together? And that's what good politicians do. Bad politicians bark their talking points. Good politicians go, I don't know, do I agree with everything with Ross? No. But there are things that we do, and let's sit down and let's work on those. And that's why it's refreshing to sort of, be part of this conversation.
Right. And I got to tell you, it's refreshing. It makes me feel good about that too, Tim. It's why I encouraged you guys to get a little panel together so we could talk about it. I was so impressed with the fact that you were acting like Americans and looking for common ground that you can all agree on and live with. So I hope that perhaps our federal government can take examples of what's going on in New Hampshire. I appreciate that.
So, Jimmy, you want to hear the poll of the audience that you asked me to take?
Yeah, go ahead. Then we got to take our break, say goodbye to this panel, bring in another one. Go ahead.
So, number one, they'd like to see it descheduled. Number two, they'd like to see some sort of social justice and a way for people who've had past crimes to be able to participate in the industry. There's a concern that if you're in West Chesterfield and they say you can't grow and somebody in Keene can, how fair is that? So I think there's that sounds to me like whether you're going to give absolute local control as many of the states have done, or you're going to begin to limit some of that. And taxation. There's some concerns about if the taxes are too high, it's just not going to work.
Well, that's why everybody loves New Hampshire, because there's no tax for the most part.
But remember, they didn't have enough tax, and look what happened. They couldn't afford the glue, and the old man on the mountain fell down.
Hey, you leave my old man.
Whoa. That's a low blow, David.
Alone. Too soon.
I liked it. Now you go up there and you look up on the mountain, you go, now where was that?
Very sad.
Needed some hempcrete to put it all together so it holds together better than concrete. Okay. Tim Egan, I so appreciate your friendship and the fact that you're willing to come on here on a somewhat regular basis. I love that. Daryl Eames and Ross Berry, we thank you so much for taking some time out of your Friday afternoon to join us. And we will have a whole new panel, and we're going to be talking about the federal bill with the National Association of Cannabis Businesses and others, including our friend Stephen Mandilli, coming up in the next half hour. So don't go away. Thank you to our friends from New Hampshire. The Green Rush Live continues after this.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And when I started Pro Cannabis Media 2 years ago, I wanted to make sure the cannabis industry had a professional outlet to share their stories in their own words. Now, since it all started with my podcast In the Weeds 3 years ago, I've done over 250 interviews. I've met some incredible people with a shared passion for this amazing plant. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the line, cannabis has saved my life, cannabis has changed my life. Well, now it's your turn. We want to give you a chance to tell your own story. It doesn't even need to be related to the medicinal power of this incredible plant. Just to give you a little incentive, we will pick 5 stories to share on our live Green Rush show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. If we share your story, you automatically get one of our t-shirts with that closing line I use all the time, it's a whole new world of weed. But as the legendary Billy Mays used to say, that's not all. One of those finalists will win one of these really cool full-story cannabis storage units. It's a great way to store your cannabis in their food-grade aluminum containers. It's award-winning, child-proof, smell-proof, and has a solid contemporary design. It's a $220 value, but you can win one if we pick your story and feature it on our show. Yes, we will pick one of those 5 finalists, and they will receive this $220 value absolutely free. Now, we ask you to keep your story to under 90 seconds on video and less than 500 words in text. So come out of the cannabis closet and tell us your story, and you could win with yourstory.com. Just go on to procannabismedia.com and sign up today. You might even join us on one of our shows.
Pro Cannabis Media Program. And by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay. Easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
So I think there's one very important difference between me and most of my team members and other cannabis accounting firms, especially outsourced cannabis accounting firms. With a lot of the other firms, you're going to find bookkeepers or folks that were accountants for their entire career, but they were junior accountants. I've spent most of my career alongside CFOs at public companies, companies with thousands of employees, public companies. So much of my career wasn't spent in the debits and credits. It was spent with the CFO, CEO, COO of large public companies, working on strategy, working on planning and big initiatives, working on projects such as mergers and integrations. So that high level experience, along with being able to do the debits and credits and having members of my team that also have fairly senior experience and also members of the team that are junior and can do the bookkeeping at a little bit lower cost than some of the people with the experience, gives our clients a much broader depth of experience than a lot of the other firms where you're hiring someone that is just a bookkeeper and can't help with the strategy side of it, or someone that's been an executive for a long time and can only help with the strategy but can't help with the hands-on.
Pro Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
And we're back. Welcome back, folks, to the 5 o'clock segment of The Green Rush with Jimmy Young, our leader, and his trusty sidekick, me, David Rabinovitz. Take it away, Jimmy.
Thank you, David. Very good. And just keep in mind, July 30th is your show. All right. I'm just letting it out there, putting it out there. All right. Welcome back to the Green Rush Live is the name of the show, because we are the only live talk show about cannabis business that we can find in the world. Please enlighten me if I'm wrong. Okay. Our chat room is open and we've got a great panel coming in here at 5 o'clock to give some feedback about the new federal legalization bill that was filed by the US Senate on Wednesday. Joining us are Tom Nolasco. He's the Director of Legal and Strategic Initiatives for the National Association of Cannabis Businesses, we call NACB. So, Tom, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Jimmy. Good to be here.
Tell us a little bit about what you do as the Director of Legal and Strategic Initiatives.
Sure. I essentially act as general counsel, but I'm also spearheading what we do. Is we're an SRO. We create best practices, national standards for the industry, and I spearhead the development of that along with our other legal and strategic initiatives.
There you go. And also from the NACB is Mark Gorman, Executive VP and COO. And being an old sports guy, Mark, I have to ask you if you're any relation to the late, great Lou Gorman, who was a longtime general manager of the Red Sox.
I wish I could say yes.
Sorry, he was a great guy, and he was a guest on my show 25 years ago. That being said, tell us about what the Executive VP and COO does at the National Association of Cannabis Business. Go ahead.
Well, essentially, I work with Tom and Gina, our CEO, and the rest of the staff to mobilize our resources behind legislative efforts. If we've developed a new standard or a new social equity wrinkle to our social equity program, we're trying to bring that to the attention of state legislators and others when it's appropriate on Capitol Hill, and so that's what keeps us busy.
Absolutely does. Any type of association. Of course, there's nothing going on in the cannabis universe these days. Holy mackerel. Someone who's very familiar with that is Stephen Mandilli, who's also with us. He's also the co-host of a joint venture with Ann Brum, one of our affiliate programs on the Pro Cannabis Media Network. So, Stephen, thank you so much for everything you do for Pro Cannabis Media.
Thank you, Jimmy. Always a pleasure. And likewise, appreciate everything you do for the cannabis industry and everyone here in Massachusetts and across the globe.
What did you say?
Across the globe.
Oh, good. I thought there was, there's another reference to the globe. I wasn't sure we were talking about the local newspaper or not. That being said, Stephen is also a veteran and someone who has a great story, but we're not going to go there. He's also a selectman in a local town called Uxbridge, Massachusetts. And Stephen, I do want to talk with you first because I want to get your reaction to the federal bill that was filed on Wednesday. And I know part of that bill has to address the issue of getting cannabis access to veterans.
Correct. Yeah, so that's something real exciting, something that I've been advocating for. I've been down to DC the past 3 years, meeting with senators and representatives to get them to push for access through the VA. We have so many injured men and women that served. I was one of them, and we come home and with injuries and we get massive amounts of pharmaceuticals, that we then, get mad that they're not getting off of because they end up, overdose deaths and addiction problems, but like no other offerings. You go off script and trying cannabis, you're completely on your own. And it's more than just a health decision. It becomes a financial decision. So anytime, it's brought up at the federal level for legalization, it's the utmost importance that there's language in there to allow that to happen at the VA. I feel like we're so far behind. We have our neighbors in the north in Canada, where their VA not only fills out the paperwork for them to get access, but they also reimburse veterans for up to an eighth to 10 grams a day. So it'll be great to see that's something similar down here being given to our veterans.
Mark, when you hear Stephen, a veteran, talking about that, that they filed this big federal bill in DC this week. What was your reaction to some of the things that you've seen in that bill?
Well, I think the bill is pretty much as advertised for some time now by Majority Leader Schumer, and in the sense that it's ambitious and it is meant to be a discussion draft, which is exactly what they've called it. They're inviting comments and criticisms and proposed modifications to not just to other fellow members of the Senate, but also to groups like ours and any people like you. So it's open for discussion and comment. I think passing it the way it is would be a real tall order, but with the right kinds of compromises, it might find some extra votes.
It certainly sparks conversation amongst politicians for sure, advocates, and even those inside the industry about some of the issues that they bring up. Tom, I do want to ask you, I'm guessing because it says legal counsel, that must mean you are an attorney. And I don't hold that against you, by the way, please. Okay. I don't at all. I have an older brother who's a retired attorney. That being said, when you negotiate a deal, right? We all recognize enough to know that leverage is really important in negotiating a deal. Am I accurate so far?
Of course.
Okay. So where is the polling, is the information, are the facts, is the science there to really, does it create a public opinion strong enough to build leverage to see any of these federal opportunities pass? What do you think? Is it a perfect storm? Are we ready for this as a country?
Yeah, it's funny that you're asking me this. In some of our other panels, where Mark and I have appeared jointly, Mark's more of the and this is funny because he's the insider lobbyist. He's being a little bit modest when you ask for his background, but he's a longtime lobbyist for Discus, for the alcohol and distilled spirits industry. So he's more knowledge and experience with that than I do. But he's more of the optimist, and I'm the pessimist. I talk about this running bet I've had for, it's now going on 3.5, 4 years, where with my colleagues, they all said it's happening soon. And I said, you're not getting federal legalization within 5 years. And I'm almost there on a lot of my bets. So I'm more of the pessimist. When you're talking about, to get back to your question with leverage, it's an interesting question because the leverage has been there for a while as far as public opinion polls go, right? We all know that across everything, across, and that's shown out through the data. So the opinion polls are there, which has caused changes in a lot of politicians, all the way up to our Vice President, Kamala Harris, who is an Attorney General who is staunchly against it. And I guarantee if the public opinion polls weren't that way, she wouldn't be on board with things like the MORE Act. So that leverage and that tailwind is there. When Mark was talking about this is an ambitious bill, it absolutely is. Just the length of it, and it's a draft bill, 163 pages versus 87 pages for the MORE Act. There's a lot in here. There's a lot to dissect. And that's intentional. It's strategic leverage, right, on the part of Schumer, because what he's essentially saying is, here it is. I know I probably don't have 60 votes. I probably don't even have enough for my caucus right now, but here it is. Let's work through this, and we'll see what we have at the end of the day, maybe a year from now, and we can get something passed that actually takes the step of descheduling. So that's the strategic purpose, I think, behind this, and that's why it's coming out now. And Schumer knows he's got a lot of headwinds, including, the White House, who isn't exactly embracing, this form of legalization. But it's out there now, and that's why we're here on shows like this discussing this.
Mark, as the COO of NACB, is the association you're affiliated with going to dissect and analyze this document and then come out with your opinions of it?
Yeah, we definitely will. We've already started doing that. I think we want to also open the doors to our members who have views about this and really collect good thoughts from anywhere we can. I mean, there's been plenty of commentary already on in the public from about tax, the tax rates, and it's pretty stiff. I mean, going up to 25%. I mean, there's some states that already have a 21% or more tax rate. I mean, that's pretty soon you're getting to half the price of the product if that's the route they're going to go. And I don't think that that's going to be acceptable to the public. There are some great things in here, like opening up research with the right kinds of cannabis availability. Interesting things about their social equity program, which I don't quite understand all of it, how it all fits together and how it would fit together with what the states are doing, but that's got to be worked through. Lots of stuff. It's going to be fun.
That's good. The word fascinating comes up all the time in conversations about cannabis with people that are being enlightened and understanding about this product more and more. And there's more research and more studies being done. And Stephen, I know you and I have had this discussion as well, that you'd think by now the educational process at our elected officials would actually be a little bit more further ahead. It's almost like they are treating it like a necessary evil weed that I have to learn about now. You've been in DC, Mark, you've been down there as well. Is that an accurate assessment of how they're approaching this?
I do believe so, Jimmy. We would hear a lot that we need research, and that's repeated over and over. And it's like, okay, well, what's stopping us from getting past saying we need it, And that just, nothing ever gets done with it. It's very frustrating in that aspect of, all the years that it's been listed as this harmful thing when all the research was done to find negative effects. nothing to find out any benefits. So, we're kind of stuck there and needing that first shoe to drop and having, some information out there. And colleague of mine, Dr. Sue Sicily, had gotten a contract with the DEA and the FDA, and then they couldn't use the product because it was so contaminated and so poor. So it's like, not only do you have to get research on it, but now you got to find out and go back and make sure that they're growing it right, so you can actually get, usable research and data out from it.
Now, we all know that there's only one place in America where it's federally allowed to be grown. Did anybody see the Today Show series? They've been doing a lot of stories. Stephen, did you see where they keep the old weed at the University of Mississippi?
What was it, like in the basement?
In a freezer at 40 degrees below zero for 7 years.
And they show it, and it's terrible looking. You can't recognize it as cannabis at all.
I felt so bad for the guy that's been in that place for 40 years dealing with this, right? I mean, you could tell it was awkward for him. He goes, look, I know it's shit. There's nothing I can do about it. It's a damn federal government. But we laugh about this. We've got an open forum here in a talk show. I've lived to see the day where we're talking about this plant as a medicine and as a tax vehicle in 2021. I'm still amazed that we can do this now. So, and David, you talk about this. It's 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps back, 5 steps forward. It's all over the place. When you see a major media outlet like NBC News doing what I thought were pretty balanced stories on the cannabis industry, this also helps the cause, doesn't it? Mark, I'm asking you.
Oh, yeah, sure it does. I've been a long believer in the more it gets, a controversial issue gets talked about, the more people relax about it. They know it's not it's something that everybody can get into the discussion. And your earlier comment about needing education is probably not as true with Stephen and your political world and the world of Massachusetts, but you'd be amazed at how little is known about cannabis regulation, taxation, the need for social equity programs and that sort of thing in the states that don't have any legal products. So right. There's a lot of education that needs to be done. That's interesting too, because you're right. We live in a legal bubble in New England here. Okay.
And it's become, David Rabinovitz, you tell me, on the outside looking in, is the stigma coming down even here in Massachusetts? Are you seeing evidence of that?
I think at this point, the sky has not fallen in, right? I think Steve would probably agree with that. And you're seeing more of that I just read an article today where it was one of the Western Massachusetts towns where they talked about all the fear that they had, nothing came to the realization. The kids are not becoming hooked. They're now becoming heroin addicts because marijuana is legalized, where people aren't turning into zombies. It's just, it's like at this point, it's ho-hum. Stores open up and nobody really takes a lot of notice of it.
Right. I was at the opening of Ready, a new dispensary in Newton, my hometown, just outside of Boston, on last Friday. Of course, I was off the internet for the first time in 6 months at that time. And what happens? I walk into a new dispensary. They're live streaming from the dispensary. So, of course, I jumped on that show. That being said, there was no one there. They had a policeman outside to handle the crowd. There wasn't a crowd. So it's all of a sudden, it's just another new business opening. Stephen, you've seen all sorts of examples of the fervor over a new dispensary. And in fact, just so you know, Stephen, I asked the New Hampshire representatives in the last show who the first person was to buy adult use legal cannabis in Massachusetts at Cultivate. They didn't know. The answer was Stephen Mandilli. They do now.
Excellent. Yeah. it's strange to become the answer to a trivia question
That's
based
right.
on that. But hey, I'll wear that proudly. I mean, we
That's
were there
right.
together, and that was a lot of what the worries was like that amount of traffic, into every town opening up, and it was really those first few weeks with nowhere else to go. You could either go to Leicester or you go to Northampton, and that was it.
And Tom or Mark, tell me what parts of the country. Tom, where are you calling in from?
I'm out in the heat here in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Oh,
Yeah, well, I'm in the heat here in Alexandria, Virginia.
Where are you, Mark?
Alexandria, Virginia, just outside Washington, but it's
Oh
pretty
no,
darn
I
hot.
I know Alexandria. I've been to it actually. What do you think of that? My brother lives in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and has been in the DC area since the 70s. So I'm very familiar with that area. And I know, Stephen, you visit the nation's capital on a somewhat regular basis as well. What I'd love to hear your guys' opinions. Is this, if you were talking to a total stranger about this bill and they say, what's the biggest change in this will be X? Mark, what's the biggest change that will come out of this bill, hopefully?
Well, I think descheduling the product, getting it off the controlled substances list will open the door to a lot of things. The way it's treated by the federal government versus the states, and the way it's treated by the banks and Veterans Administration. I mean, it's gonna change a lot of things all by itself.
Stephen, what are you working on in Massachusetts right now? I know that you also are very active in the state politics and policy making. What's happening in Massachusetts? I believe there was something like 6 bills the last time that we talked that were under consideration. What's going on in the State House?
Yeah, I mean, I think the total now that's been assigned to that committee is close to 60 bills. I have 2 bills, but both companion bills. I have one in the House, one in the Senate. One is to increase, it's H179 and S70, which both aim to increase access and a new pathway for veterans to become registered patients in Massachusetts, similar to ways they're already doing in a couple other states. Adding opioid use disorder to the list of qualifying conditions, as well as PTSD, to help break stigma. And then also a separate bill, which is to protect Second Amendment rights for medical patients in Massachusetts. We did a year-long research study for veterans in cannabis and their medical cannabis and health. And the top barriers reported were, money for a card, money for a product, the right product, and also owning a firearm. And again, these are tasks, other states have already passed legislation to protect those Second Amendment rights. So we went in again, we're not trying to, redesign the wheel here. We're just kind of bringing everyone up to speed. And anything I can do for a veteran that's remove barriers, create more access, bring education, I'm committed to doing that. I made that commitment, 6 years ago when I came off of everything.
Well, we have a lot of respect for you, Stephen Mandilli, and the passion and the work you put in with the joint venture and that show. And we look forward to continuing with that. Tom, I just want to ask you and Mark one more question, because we are up against the half hour. Obviously, Senator Cory Booker is passionate and adamant that this is a social justice bill. And one of the things I'm really concerned about when it comes to future reform is not just to expunge the records of those who have been incarcerated for possession crimes and nonviolent crimes, but coming up with a program that actually gives those people an opportunity, workforce development. NACB, I'm guessing, has got to come up with I'm sure they have a policy about this. How important is it to create ways to get these people back into paying jobs and active members of society?
Yeah, and I mean, it's critically important, not only to Senator Booker, but to the NACB. We created our own social equity guidelines that we presented to different municipalities, cities, and states, and continue to do so. We just did that last week. Arizona just came out with the social equity guidelines in May with public comment period, and we're advising them along with other states. So it is important to the NACB. I will say this, and just so you understand, some of the components of Schumer and Booker's bill, they are stressing things like community reinvestment grant program and equitable licensing grant program that would be run. And then there was also, by the way, just a little poke to the Biden administration. I don't know if you noticed that, but saying, hey, by the way, we're going to prevent the revocation of security clearances for federal employees. So there's that whole dust up earlier this year where the White House revoked some of those. But the other side of that, right, of this, of Senator Booker's pretty ardent stance on this is the bill we need to pass, there's some fallout from that, because what the stance is, it's gotten politicized now, is go for this bill and ignore the Safe Banking Act, because as Senator Booker said, that's just to support the rich, corporations. And that's not to go for social equity, which personally I think is a mistake, and it's a mischaracterization of what the Safe Banking Act is. But hey, I mean, Mark, it's Washington and everything gets politicized, but it's a shame that, it's become the zero-sum game of take this bill, not the other one, because, and it is, listen, this is the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act is a much more ambitious bill. It deschedules it, like Mark said. That's probably the most important component of this. But in my mind, take what you can get. You can probably pass the Safe Banking Act, in short order. Take that now. Don't make it one or the other, and don't push this where this is something like this, where it's this massive, is going to take a while.
Right.
And if you're sacrificing that, and Mark sent me an article on this, there's pushback on it from Ed Perlmutter, of course. But I think it's the wrong move. As much as the NACP supports social justice and all the social justice components in here, don't politicize it. Take what you can get.
Well, I think the climate is one of the biggest challenges. I think this bill is exciting to talk about. I certainly encourage talk and communication about every element of our society. So we will certainly be talking about that as we continue. I want to thank Tom Nolasco and Mark Gorman from the NACB. I actually look forward to talking with both of you guys on the phone, as opposed to texting or in a Zoom room. And I look forward to that in the future. Thank you. And Stephen, can't wait to see you again at conventions, face-to-face conventions, right? And parties, they're coming back. We're coming back, and we've got a dream team of marketing champions. We're going to talk about the use of billboards in advertising for cannabis for obvious reasons. And we'll be back with more of the Green Rush Live after this.
So I think there's one very important difference between me and most of my team members and other cannabis accounting firms, especially outsourced cannabis accounting firms. With a lot of the other firms, you're going to find bookkeepers or folks that were accountants for their entire career, but they were junior accountants. I've spent most of my career alongside CFOs at public companies with thousands of employees, public companies. So much of my career wasn't spent in the debits and credits. It was spent with the CFO, CEO, COO of large public companies, working on strategy, working on planning and big initiatives, working on projects such as mergers and integrations. So that high level experience, along with being able to do the debits and credits and having members of my team that also have fairly senior experience and also members of the team that are junior and can do the bookkeeping at a little bit lower cost than some of the people with the experience, gives our clients a much broader depth of experience than a lot of the other firms where you're hiring someone that is just a bookkeeper and can't help with the strategy side of it, or someone that's been an executive for a long time and can only help with the strategy but can't help with the hands-on.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And you know, when I started Pro Cannabis Media 2 years ago, I wanted to make sure the cannabis industry had a professional outlet to share their stories in their own words. Now, since it all started with my podcast In the Weeds 3 years ago, I've done over 250 interviews. I've met some incredible people with a shared passion for this amazing plant. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the line, "Cannabis has saved my life. Cannabis has changed my life." Well, now it's your turn. We want to give you a chance to tell your own story. It doesn't even need to be related to the medicinal power of this incredible plant. Just to give you a little incentive, we will pick 5 stories to share on our live Green Rush show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. If we share your story, you automatically get one of our t-shirts with that closing line I use all the time, "It's a whole new world of weed." But as the legendary Billy Mays used to say, that's not all. One of those finalists will win one of these really cool full-story cannabis storage units. It's a great way to store your cannabis in their food-grade aluminum containers. It's award-winning, child-proof, smell-proof, and has a solid contemporary design. It's a $220 value, but you can win one if we pick your story and feature it on our show. Yes, we will pick one of those 5 finalists, and they will receive this $220 value absolutely free. Now, we ask you to keep your story to under 90 seconds on video and less than 500 words in text. So come out of the cannabis closet and tell us your story, and you could win with yourstory.com. Just go on to procannabismedia.com and sign up today. You might even join us on one of our shows.
Pro Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
And we're back. Welcome back to the final segment of this Friday's The Green Rush Show with Jimmy Young and me, David Rabinovitz. We've got another great cast of characters. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and we think one more may be joining us. But Tom, let's start with you.
Hey, I'm Tom Schneider, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Revolutionary Clinics and Rev Brands.
Seth, who are you?
My name's Seth Warby, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Cannabis Creative Group. And we do marketing and digital solutions for the cannabis space.
Absolutely. And both you guys do great work, and I so appreciate you coming on. So in Massachusetts this week, a local dispensary made national news by putting up a billboard that had the likeness of Borat, the character played by Sacha Baron Cohen. His legal team has now sued Solar Therapeutics for using the likeness of that actor without permission. Tom, you've had experience putting billboards up all over Massachusetts when you first, in the area of dominant influence of Rev Clinics dispensaries, the footprint, if you will. How effective is a billboard as a marketing tool in the cannabis space?
Well, a billboard is going to put you on the map. Okay. I mean, right now there's a lot of billboards. I'm glad we had our billboard up when we did, because we were the only billboard up. There might have been one in Western Mass or Southern Mass somewhere, but basically we were the only billboard up in the general Boston area. You know, one thing about billboards that it is the it's the ultimate awareness tool. It's the opposite of direct response. So you don't put up a billboard that's costing you 15 grand a month, and you can't expect to get a return on that investment right away. It's really kind of like Budweiser ads that you see over and over and over again. Eventually you might go and buy a Budweiser, but when you see the ad, you don't get off the couch and run to the liquor store and buy Budweiser. So it is really all about awareness. When we did our billboard, we needed awareness. We were revolutionary clinics, 3 at the time. I think it was 2 medical dispensaries, and it really put us on the map. I mean, we had 6 million people a month were seeing that billboard, stuck in traffic on Route 93. Granted, only 1 out of 100 of those people in those cars could actually shop at our store. That was probably the most painful part of it, but it put us on the map to the tune where there are a lot of people out there that call us big marijuana. And in fact, we aren't big marijuana. We're 3 medical shops and a grow facility. So it does put you on the map. There's no doubt. Today's environment, a little tougher because, every 10th billboard is a cannabis billboard. So you do get lost a little bit in the noise right now.
Right. In the weeds. You get lost in the weeds. I get it.
Yeah, you get lost
Seth.
in the weeds.
Seth's been on In the Weeds way back when. Seth, as someone who's, the head of an agency, is it just another marketing tool? Does it make more sense for a dispensary near a highway? How do you look at the billboard as a marketing tool in cannabis?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tom hit the nail on the head. It's all about impressions, just like anything else. Marketing is, in essence, a game of numbers. The creativity and the calls to action are important. If you have 100 visitors going somewhere and a 1% conversion rate, if you can go to 200 visitors and a 2% conversion rate, you've gone from 1 to 4 customers. So, the more people you have driving by your sign, the better visibility. Obviously, some of the pitfalls are bad visibility. It's not up for very long, things like that. But Tom hit the nail on the head with the reinforcement, especially locally. It's local reinforcement. If you're investing into digital marketing and people haven't made quite a full decision, but they're doing their research, seeing that and being reinforced almost daily, if it's on their route to work or route to school or wherever, will enhance that decision 10 plus fold, if not more. So you do see a residual effect from it. But at the end of the day, unless you have a specific call to action, which is real hard because you want to keep it simple and subtle. We've got cannabis, come on in. That's about it.
Right. Now, you both know the regulations in cannabis are very strict about where a dispensary can, talk to people or market their products or services. And one of the things that I know is part of that compliance is any message, you have to make sure that it is an over 21 audience. Now, how in the world did you guys at Rev Clinics prove that it was an over 21% watching that billboard as they drove by? You said something like 6 million people drive by at 93. How do you prove that they're all over 21?
Well, I stood there on Route 93 and I stopped every car that went by and I interviewed everybody. I made everybody show me their license. And, in the end, it worked out. No. Yeah. So in any advertising world, whether it's press, print or radio or outdoor, they have audited demographics. Now, don't ask me what the basis of the audit is, but I'm sure it's real. I mean, it has to be real. The great thing about working with somebody like Clear Channel or some of these other folks that have the billboard properties, they can't afford to mess this up, or they get the major fine as well. They take a liability along with us. So if they tell us that the audited statistics on Route 93 is 88% 21 plus, I got to go with it. And that's the only way to do it. And believe me, I got a phone call since we were the first billboard. I got a phone call from the CCC and they were like, okay, it was our inspector and he was kind of, grilled me as he is paid to do. And I had to go and find those audited statistics, which I fortunately had seen before he asked me. So I felt pretty confident that I had them and could get them again. And I sent him the audited stats and, they checked out. It wasn't a lot. It was literally like a couple of percentage points over the 85%. But if you think about it, not that I've ever stood on the highway and interviewed everybody that went by, but if you think about it, when you look at the people driving down 93, it's mostly one person in a car. So they're driving and they're adults going places, they're going to work or they're going out and there are kids, but most kids are at home playing in the yard. They're not in their mom and dad's car going down 93. I guess 15 or maybe call it 12 or 13% of them are, but it's an adult world out there. We also did the audit statistics on the tea because at one point we thought we were going to advertise on the tea. only to find out the MBTA wouldn't take our advertising. But wow, it's like 97% adult on the tee, which I would not have guessed. Figured that there'd be a lot of kids in the tee, but it's mostly adults going to work.
Seth, as someone who has to recommend media plans to dispensaries or any of your clients, are you using that same research, and what is your feeling about that the audience is over 21?
Yeah, I mean, again, following Tom's fairly easy. We've worked together in the past, so I hear what he's saying and believe in the same stuff. I mean, anytime we've done a billboard, whether it's outside the cannabis space or within the cannabis space, you have to follow Clear Channel or whatever the company is, the big company that technically owns that land and or that space that you're renting from. In essence, they're your landlord for that space. So they're not going to take that risk and risk their stream of revenue. So for the most part, you need to go by those statistics, but it tends to be the urban areas, the highways that are okay. So as you move into Boston, you'll see them in, there's in downtown Allston, Brighton area, you're starting to see a bunch of billboards out near Somerville and Charlestown and around the river, where most of the audience to be able to afford to live there is post-college age and above 21. So, I mean, where I am in the city, you're starting to see a good pop of them. Now, outside of Massachusetts is a whole nother ballgame, and it's different in every state. Obviously, when you land in a place like Las Vegas, it just punches you in the face versus what you see in Boston, which is still, from my perspective, nice to see because it helps the destigmatization and everything works together. And there's also people out there that don't realize it's right in their town. And as they drive by that every day and they see that, hey, next exit, recreational cannabis sign, really simple and subtle, when that Friday night comes around that they do want to try that or move away from their norm and not go out to the bar, whatever it might be, again, to Tom's point, it's reinforced constantly and that ends up working.
So print versus video versus audio. What media do you think, Seth, actually delivers the most impactful message, even now that the consumer is in charge of their use of media, when they want it, how they want it, wherever they want to get it? What's the most powerful tool?
I'm going to say digital because that's my world. And even though I got a team of creative people doing branding and packaging and we're out there, I've always been personally, I'm the computer guy and an analytics guy that likes to generate traffic, but then I have the creative staff to do the conversion side of it. With that in mind, it's content strategy and having a strategy that is a pyramid in sense from the top down. So as you create content and or a strategy around the type of content you want to create, think about all the different platforms and how are you going to use that content in your social media, on a billboard, in a video, in your PR, within your potential, on your website, all these different places, a blog, a resource center, whatever it might be that you're creating content, and have it work for you instead of constantly going to the drawing board every time you have to do something. And, examples of that, and I know Tom's done similar stuff, but whether it be an ebook or a full brand catalog, if you have multiple brands, things like that people can then take and derive bits and pieces of it. You can take an ebook and break it out into multiple posts on your social media. You can take a brand guide and make a slick for each brand. So things like that tend to be how I see it working.
There you go. I want to go back. It's funny. I know I've seen the billboard company name that put this one up, and I think it was on I-95, I-195. Do you guys happen to know who owned that billboard? It's right on. If I could see the image.
The Borat billboard?
Yeah, it's like Wildwood or Westwood or something.
Could it be West? It could be Westwood.
Westwood?
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting because I didn't hear that they were part of this lawsuit either.
Yeah, I don't think they didn't break any laws.
No,
so
they took money from a client and put the image up of the client that the client wanted, and
right. So I don't think I don't think they're liable for that. Not that I'm an attorney, right? I mean, obviously everybody's liable for everything when you're involved in something, right?
Right.
But I don't think they have any liability there. I think where they could have liability is if they're breaking a state like CCC law, where they're advertising, you know, because I know that when I'm buying billboards or when I bought billboards, Clear Channel was more careful than I was. I mean, they and this was before anybody was buying billboards for cannabis. So my rep went to every billboard like in the area we wanted, and she herself did like all the circumference measuring for schools and stuff like that. And she came back. I mean, she worked really hard. And she came back and she's like, there's 4 billboards you can buy. And it's these 4. And only 2 are available. So, you know, and she seemed very concerned that we didn't misstep. Where I'm Borat, I mean, if I want to, you know, if I want to offend somebody's copyright, I don't think, you know, I think if I tell you I'm going to put Borat on my billboard, you're going to figure that I figured out the ins and outs of that, and it's a safe thing to do.
Right. Seth, have you had any issues with any clients over the years when you've been in this cannabis creative group that wanted you to do something that you knew was not going to be a good idea for them?
Probably something that I wanted to do.
I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, we have clients that want to push the envelope often. You know, working with a blunt wrap company and some of their social media posts, you know, trying to tame them down because, you know, not to say sex sells sometimes, but that was the push they were going for when we came in, and, you know, it was going a little bit too far. So you have to find that balance of, hey, do we want to create this as a professional brand and have that kind of feel in the market, but still have some subtleties to it. And they did a good job kind of shifting their gears from there. So that was a challenge, and always is in marketing, how to utilize certain tools. With that in mind, no, I mean, for the most part, you know, when somebody wants to do something that's blatantly stupid, it's fairly quick to say, hey, that makes, you know, that's a little too far. You know, and obviously in my space and the digital world, a lot of it comes down to understand the regulations of the platforms. So the use of certain words, whether it be cannabis, weed, marijuana, THC, you know, things like that. And every platform, Facebook, Instagram, you know, Google, they're all different. So, you know, we kind of have to stay within that as well. So there are restraints. But if you know those kind of regulations, you can maneuver your way through and do some good advertising, and it all works together. I mean, again, content strategy at the top, and then however you filter it down with whatever budget you have. I mean, if you have the budget to do high power videos and utilize them properly, great. If you don't, you know, if you can't afford that billboard on 93, there are other ways to move your content. However, it does reinforce. So, you know, going back to topic, billboards do work.
Right. Jimmy, just to build on something Tom mentioned, actually the company that owns that billboard is a local company. I think they probably own about 12 billboards that are out of Shrewsbury, Murray Outdoor Communications. So you go to a large company that's got national billboards, they probably have a huge legal team and lots of due diligence. And that could be one of the factors how nobody checked to see whether the advertiser actually had the licensing rights to the images they were putting up there.
You said that was Murray?
Murray Outdoor Communications.
All right.
Yep.
Do you know them, Tom?
Never heard of them. And it's funny you mentioned that. I did Google it while we were talking. And it's like, who's Murray? I expected to see Outfront or somebody, but nothing against them. I don't know that group.
Yep. You know. Founded in 1988, and it's a small New England company with billboards.
There you go. I'd be remiss if I did not get your reaction, Seth and Tom, to the US Senator bill that was filed on Wednesday, 163 document that is designed to be a public discussion document. And they are asking the public and the business community for their feedback on the various items that are in this 163-page document. I'm going out on a limb thinking that neither one of you has looked at this at all. You tell me I'm wrong, but Seth, have you, what's your reaction when you see something like that happening at the federal level? Does that make you feel like, wow, we're really getting close to getting rid of the stigma. We're moving in the right direction. What's your feeling about it?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had time to read over the last 36 hours, so I got some catch up. I had golf league and again was supposed to be out there today, but you texted me to do this, so here I am. No,
Thank you for your dedication.
It's all good. The thunderstorms just rolled through, so I still got time to sneak in 9 later. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, anytime there's any movement, and that's how I feel about all of this, whether it's in the CBD space, whether it's Delta 8, whether it's whether it's THC based, but anytime there's any movement at the Washington D.C. level and not at the state level, I mean, I think the states have kind of figured it out. There's still a few that we all think are a little bit behind, but they'll catch up, I believe, at least from the medicinal standpoint, sooner than later. But at the end of the day, anytime there's any movement, that's positive. And I think we're going to continue to see proactive movement in the right direction from, the federal government as we go forward.
Tom, what was your reaction to the legislation, at least that they're filing? I'm sure you're echoing a lot of Seth's ideas and comments there too.
Well, I've read every word of it.
Just that was in your spare time after you asked everybody for an ID as they drove by your billboard.
No,
right?
he's making me look horrible. Oh, geez.
No, I took JFK speed reading course. I actually didn't even know it was there. But I mean, I heard about it, but I'd not read it.
Yeah.
So I mean, let's face it. Cannabis was vilified for reasons, creating the war on drugs, and that's just falling apart at this point. Anybody that knows anything about cannabis realizes that it's actually a miraculous plant. It heals, it makes people feel better, and it's a lot safer than this beer I'm drinking right now. So we know that the dominoes are really starting to fall, and it's just a matter of time for this whole thing to normalize. Hopefully, it'll be happening faster than slower, but I got to imagine in 10 years, it's going to feel a lot like, the beer industry or any other industry where you have some giants, you have some middle craft players. You got the Sam Adams was actually really not even a craft player anymore, but you've got that middle ground, and then you've got all the fun micros. I really look forward to the day that that's happening, and it doesn't feel to me like it's that far off. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's politics involved, which is my least favorite topic. And we've got the Democrats in right now, which is a hell of a lot more likely to go pro on cannabis than the Republicans. Hopefully, we'll get 2 terms out of the Democrats, so that because it's going to take a little bit of time. And sometimes I wonder if they're going to make a big move like this in their first administration, because they can do all the stuff they want in their second administration. Particularly, although Joe Biden will likely not have a second administration, but I think it's happening. It's just a matter of time and normalized, and we're all going to just be looking back at this. It's like, remember the days when Prohibition ended,
right?
Wasn't that weird?
That's right.
Everybody was fighting and swearing at each other. It's like,
right.
Now
I want to ask. This will be my last question for both of you guys. It's a challenge that we face in the cannabis industry on a somewhat regular basis whenever we push something out to the public, whether it's a promotion or a story or a contest. There really are 2 distinct markets for cannabis. The fastest growing demographic, which is the 50 plus demographic, and then that 21 to 34-year-old party group of young people that, gosh, I wish I was 21 again. Seth, how do you figure out which message? Can you get them both, or do you have to change your message for each demographic group?
No, I mean, you can get both demographics, and, not to go too far back, but to finish off that last thought on the last question, as Tom was talking, I was thinking about how just last week during the All-Star game or the NBA Finals, I saw the Nike's new updated commercial, how they always have a special segment, and they really highlighted right at the end that runner that got banned from Tokyo, Richardson, I believe is her name.
Sha'Carri Richardson, 100-meter women's sprinter. Yep.
So it was good to see that Nike jumped all over that, and they're like, this woman can't go and compete, but we're going to put her right on the face of this ad of a main corporation, basically supporting that what she did wasn't wrong and was good for, is okay. It wasn't a performance enhancer, at least in that case. So, just kind of bringing that thought home. When I saw that, it really struck a chord. And it was subtle. It was simple and subtle. They did nothing wrong. She wasn't smoking a joint when she was running there, but it symbolizes that they stand by her, as a person and for what she's doing. So to me, that was important. But no, hitting demographics is the same as any other marketing effort, whether you're marketing olive oil, razor scooters, or cannabis. You want to know who you're targeting, how you're going to target them. And obviously in different areas, we have clients in college towns, whether it be Fayetteville, do I say that right? Down south. We have clients we have in Denver, clients here in Boston. So when you're in college hotbeds, it's definitely a different marketing, whether it be the brand or the messaging is a little bit different than some of the rural or suburban areas, where especially the affluent suburban areas where it's more expensive. So you don't necessarily have a younger audience. It's more family oriented. So for us, it's understanding, and that goes for any business we're going to market, your customer avatar, and then figuring out from there, how do you attack it? But the one synergy is professionalism. I mean, at the end of the day, if it looks professional and it's done right, no matter what market you're going towards, you don't want to pigeonhole another one. You don't want to come out with something that somebody in a different market can at least relate to or is going to be turned off by. It might target one versus the other, but if they're in that market, if they live in Burlington, Vermont, for example, they know they're in a college market. They're going to expect that type of marketing versus some other markets. So anyway, that's my take on it. I'll turn it over to Tom, see what his thoughts are.
And Tom, go ahead. You got 30 seconds to wrap it up, and then I'm going to say goodbye.
Okay, I'll give you my apple pie theory. Maybe because I'm lazy and maybe because I don't have a lot of money to market all the segments on a mark to. But I look at it as like apple pie. If I show an apple pie to a little kid, to a grandma, to a young person, to everybody loves apple pie. And if you do it in such a way that you're really talking to everybody, you can really save a lot of hair pulling and get to people about the product itself. And I could go on and on. I've got a few other nuances, but I know that I'm out of time.
Yeah, and you have to go somewhere at 6, and I don't want to keep you over. So I just want to thank Tom and Rev Clinics for their support over the years. The number one medical dispensary in Massachusetts. It's really the only one I try to go to on a regular basis. So
I think we're the only one left.
I'm actually one of their biggest customers, Jimmy. I was just there yesterday, so it's all good.
Well, as you know, their wholesale division is all over the state. You could go to just about any adult use dispensary in Massachusetts and find Rev Clinics stuff, if you will, the Black Mamba strain, for instance, or something like that. So you could certainly visit the local dispensary in your town. Seth, how do people get to Cannabis Creative Group?
At Cannabis Creative or cannabiscreativegroup.com. Check us out. Feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions. We got a full staff, and as virtual as they've been, they're starting to come back in and travel a little bit. So the world is good and life is good. Thanks for having us, Jimmy. Always good to see you.
Nice to see you too. Hit him straight, Seth. For David Rabinovitz, thank you again for being my sidekick, being there. And actually, I got to tell you, your history of Timothy Leary was the best part of this show. I
don't think so, Jimmy, but thank you.
All right. So for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
We are all joining together to release draft legislation to end the federal prohibition on cannabis.
Coming up on We Talk News, history is made in the US Senate as Senators Schumer, Booker, and Wyden introduce a bill to reform cannabis laws at the federal level.
This is a historic day that these two leaders are going to put their will and their work and all of their heart behind this justice bill.
Now, the real work begins for lobbyists and our elected officials. We'll hear from the NCIA's Michael Correa as he gets ready to battle in the lobbies of the Capitol building.
Will this pass? Well, we have Schumer, Wyden, and Booker. There's 3. Okay, where are the other 57? You know, what are we going to do to get to 60? We're in a very hyper-partisan time now in D.C.,
In Massachusetts, a dispensary makes national news for all the wrong reasons as Sacha Baron Cohen sues Solar Therapeutics over this billboard. The Boston area's newest dispensary is in my backyard. Are you ready for ready? Get ready for We Talk News next.
Pro-Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. What an amazing week in the cannabis world. We talk about being part of history as we continue to document the end of cannabis prohibition in the U.S. And this week was the first big step. Take it away, Senator Chuck Schumer.
The war on drugs has really been a war on people, particularly people of color. The Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act would help put an end to the unfair targeting and treatment of communities of color by removing cannabis from the federal list of controlled substances. This is an idea, it's not just an idea whose time has come, it's long overdue. We have all seen the agony of a young person arrested with a small amount of marijuana in his or her pocket. And because of the historical over-criminalization of marijuana, they have a very severe criminal record they have to live with their whole lives. Tougher to get a job, tougher to get credit, tougher to live a normal life. The waste of human resources because of the historic over-criminalization has been one of the great historical wrongs for the last decades. And we are going to change it.
It's called the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act, and it's a 163-page document that decriminalizes cannabis at the federal level, expunges records of nonviolent cannabis offenders, and gives opportunities to those most impacted by the failed war on drugs.
In 2019, there were more marijuana arrests than all other violent crime arrests combined, and the majority of those were for simple possession. This is a grievous reality. Lives are being destroyed every single day. And the hypocrisy of this is that right here in the Capitol, now people running for Congress, people running for Senate, people running for President of the United States readily admit that they've used marijuana.
For the life of me, I don't understand how Republicans who say they're for states' rights won't support what my colleagues are talking about. Because what this bill does is we decriminalize at the federal level, but we don't require states to legalize. So this speaks right to what the majority leader is saying. If they're listening to their constituents, and this is being done all over the country, they're going to move of their own volition. But the three of us are supporting a states' rights approach that says decriminalize at the federal level, give the states the option.
Now the work begins for the lobbyists like the NCIA's Director of Government Relations, Michael Correa.
There is no perfect legislation. This won't be perfect even for cannabis industry. Even if I wrote a bill, it would be perfect for me or NCIA, but maybe others would say this isn't perfect. NCIA is not one company. It's not 10 companies. It's the cannabis industry as a whole. And there will be differences between a big MSO, between a medium, between a small, someone within the state, and what an advocate wants to address some of these issues, to make sure it's diverse. So there's lots of issues out there. Nothing's going to be perfect. But the key is, what can we do to get something over the finish line? Get something that, we can agree on 90%. And that's something where NCIA has tried to have that position Like, there are certain issues that we need to address, Congress has to address for us to support.
For more on this story, here's our DC report with Vote Pro Podcast, Phil Adams. Phil?
Hi, I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, and this is the Weed Talk News DC report. The long-anticipated cannabis legalization bill was released this week. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, along with Senate Finance Committee Chairman Ron Wyden of Oregon and Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, unveiled the 163-page Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act on Wednesday. Among its key provisions, the bill would federally deschedule cannabis under the Controlled Substances Act, expunge prior convictions for cannabis possession, and transfer regulatory authority from the Drug Enforcement Administration to the Food and Drug Administration and other federal agencies. The bill would also impose a federal tax on cannabis products and maintain the authority of the states to set their own cannabis policies. A portion of the tax revenues would be reinvested into communities most impacted by the war on drugs. At a press briefing, Booker spoke of the importance of restoring social and economic justice after years of a failed war on drugs.
We are in the midst of a grievous moment of injustice, and it is deep at the core of who we say we are, equal justice under law. And so we have waited too long. We've seen the disaster of prohibition once before in this nation. This is hurting every American.
Legalization advocates have been anxiously awaiting this legislation to see what's in it. Michael Correa, Director of Government Relations for the National Cannabis Industry Association, says his organization is ready to dive into the details.
What are their tax rates? What exactly it means? What's it do for testing? What's it do, for small businesses? What's it do for interstate commerce? There's lots of things we need to sort of peel away and look through, and that takes some time.
Schumer says he understands the White House is anticipating this legislation and that he and his colleagues are going to lobby hard for the president's support. For its part, the White House is standing pat on its long-held position on legalization. Within a few minutes after the Senate unveiled the legislation, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked about the new bill. Psaki reiterated President Biden's opposition to legalizing cannabis, stating, quote, "Nothing has changed, and there's no new endorsements of legislation to report today." On the campaign trail, Biden pledged to decriminalize and reschedule cannabis. That's the We Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
So what's next? What can the public do? Well, tell your senators why they should vote for this. There's a public comment period until September 1st. All you have to do is send an email to cannabis_reform@finance.senate.gov. Now it's time to check out what happened on Wall Street after this big announcement with those always volatile cannabis stocks. Here's the Green Market Report's Deborah Borchardt with that story.
This is the business update for Weed Talk News from the Green Market Report. Organigram Holdings reported that its third quarter revenue grew 31% over last year to $29.1 million. This was an increase of 51% sequentially. The net loss for the company fell 96% to just $4 million from last year's $89 million. We have a lot of acquisitions to go over this week. High Tide is buying a dispensary chain with 6 stores in Saskatchewan. 1 is operational, 5 are in various stages of construction and development, and all are expected to be operational by the end of 2021. Evio Labs is buying Leading Edge Farms of Henderson, Nevada. Australis Capital, operating as Audacious, is buying a cannabinoid-infused shot beverage company called Loose. And finally, M. Hardin said it has decided to suspend construction at the company's Warman facility, and they've also launched a sales and investment solicitation process related to the company and all of its Canadian and U.S. assets. I'm Deborah Borchardt, and this has been the Green Market Report Business Update for Weed Talk News.
Back here in the state of Massachusetts, we have 2 stories about 2 dispensaries. One is Solar Therapeutics in Somerset, Mass., and the other is Ready in Newton. That's Ready with an I, and it opened this week. That other dispensary, Solar Therapeutics, is the only solar-powered facility in the state of Massachusetts, and it has been open since February 2020, the month before the pandemic shutdown. Solar Therapeutics made the national news for all the wrong reasons this week, unless you think any publicity is good publicity. It just might be costly. Here's Canacaster Ron Marshalsea with our Bay State Cannabis Report. Ron?
I'm Ron Marshalsea with the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Comedic actor Sacha Baron Cohen filed a $9 million lawsuit against Somerset Solar Therapeutics for using his likeness without his permission on a billboard located just off a Massachusetts highway. Playing off his comic character Borat, this billboard was put up in early April and taken down on April 27th, just days after the cease and desist letter was sent to Solar Therapeutics and their CEO, Ed Dow. This week, the lawsuit was filed in US District Court in Boston. In their brief, Cohen's company, Please You Can Touch LLC, states that the defendants have conveyed to the public that Mr. Baron Cohen has endorsed their products and is affiliated with their business. The brief continues saying, to the contrary, Mr. Baron Cohen has never used cannabis in his life, and he would never participate in an advertising campaign for cannabis for any amount of money. Solar Therapeutics was asked for an interview and shared a simple response from an attorney named Nicholas Heeman, who said, upon receipt of the cease and desist letter from Mr. Cohen's legal counsel, Solar immediately requested that the sign company remove the billboard in question. As there is an active case before the court, we have no further comment at this time. Peter Kelman is an intellectual property attorney in Massachusetts, and he explains how challenging intellectual property ownership can be in Hollywood.
Sort of gets to the fundamentals of intellectual property, which is pretty complicated. But the big issue that I think Cohen faces here is that he's naming in the lawsuit both himself and his character Borat. And the problem is it's not clear that Cohen has ownership rights to Borat, because if you look up the intellectual property records, it's actually 20th Century Fox who owns the copyrights to Borat. So that's going to make it a bit of a problem.
Billboards are one of the only tools that many legal states have allowed for the marketing of cannabis, and some states are starting to ban them. This will be one of the topics for Friday's Green Rush Live talk show on the Pro Cannabis Media Network at 4 p.m. Eastern. In the western suburb of Newton, a new adult use dispensary has opened to the over 21 public. Ready is locally owned by a handful of Metro West partners who plan on opening 2 more stores in the Fenway area and in Natick. For one of their principals, Todd Fennard of Weston, it has been a long journey to opening day.
Our friends and family event may have been the most gratifying professional experience I've ever had, because for the last 5 years, we were busting our asses to try to get to the point where we could open our first of what we hope and expect will be 3. And there were so many times in those 5 years when you felt like that day is just never going to come. And you've got investors and you have family members and you have friends, and they're asking you, why is it not open yet? And what's taking you so long? And to get to the day and to be able to welcome your friends and your family in, I'm on a high right now that has nothing to do with cannabis. Or I guess it has everything to do with cannabis. Yeah.
If you visit Ready, you might see PCM TV on one of their monitors. Just don't put up a billboard. Ready is located at 23 Elliott Street in Newton, right off the Riverside D-Line T-stop and just off Route 9 eastbound. That's this week's Massachusetts Cannabis Report. For Weed Talk News, I'm Ron Marshalsea.
Next up on Weed Talk News, old contributor to this show, Kurt Dalton from Cannabis.net, with his spin on that Solar Therapeutics story and the power of the copyright.
Thanks, Jimmy. Kurt with Cannabis.net here. And wow, billboards it is. Usually California gets the headlines on what they can and can't put on a billboard. But with Sacha Baron Cohen filing suit against Solar Dispensary for the use of the Borat character, we are now in the news as well. An interesting take that hard to believe that they didn't know they couldn't use Sacha Baron Cohen's character. So I wonder if they're sly as a fox, if maybe they did know, and a lot of links and publicity. We'll see what happens there. But a very interesting thing, using the likeness and image is obviously you're not allowed to do without expressed written consent. If you ever hear that at the end of a movie or as somewhere. This happened as well with a very popular pandemic exercise equipment company known as Peloton. As you remember, they were using copyrighted music during their streaming classes. So YouTube, YouTube, Rolling Stones, whatever it is, they're using it in their class, charging people. And of course, people are listening all over the world. And they got in some trouble too after their IPO from the Artists Association saying, you just can't use copyrighted music, stream it out there and charge people membership and not share the loot. So it'll be interesting. I'm sure this will settle. And I hope solar will know better moving forward. But again, billboard advertising is very popular for dispensaries. Billboard companies are very happy to take their money, but you do have to play by not only the cannabis rules that are set up in each state, but also the copyright and trade infringement rules set up for everyone who uses advertising or uses images or likenesses or certain words in ads. So we'll see how it plays out. Back to you, Jimmy.
Now it's time to go coast to coast with our own California Cannacaster, Jackie Bryant. Her newsletter is called The Cannabis. It's also the name of a column she started in a San Diego newspaper a long time ago in a state far, far away. Here's Jackie Bryant.
Hi, this is Jackie Bryant recording from San Diego, California for Weed Talk News. The first story we have out of California is a strongly worded editorial in the LA Times opinion section, which was written by the staff as a whole. It slams Prop 64 for its many perceived oversights, which the piece say weakens the industry and strengthens the black market. They also say that illegal grows and the various ills that illegal cultivation bring with it, like increased crime and destruction of wildlife, is plaguing California's desert towns thanks to loopholes in the law. It should be used as a cautionary tale for other emerging cannabis markets. The second story is from San Diego, where the DOJ has prosecuted more than 50 smugglers from Mexico who brought the dangerous pesticide carbofuran over the border. Carbofuran is highly toxic to humans and the land and anything else alive, and is commonly found in illegal grows, including trespasses on federal land. The third story highlights the very precarious wildfire season us Californians find ourselves in right now. In Mendocino County, California-based marijuana distributor Flow Canna admitted that one of its employees started a fire that burned 80 acres, forcing 250 people to flee the area and destroying 3 houses. It's called the Broiler Fire. It started July 7th, and Flow Canna said an employee who was mowing grass struck a rock and caused a spark, igniting the fire. That's all for California this week. Thanks.
There's an interesting battle of words over cannabis in the South Carolina gubernatorial election, where a Republican congressman actually came to the defense of a Democratic candidate for governor who was pro-cannabis. That state's Republican Party chairman, Drew McKissick, attacked that candidate's position on cannabis, saying he's playing with fire, using the tired and disproven claim that crime and health problems are exacerbated in legal states. Republican Tom Davis broke party lines and said that his party's stance on medical cannabis is an intellectually lazy position that doesn't even try to present medical facts as they currently exist.
Well, this is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Everybody likes to lick the spoon when making baked goods, but you just can't do it when you work at a licensed cannabis company in Michigan. And you're on the job, and you're on camera. Yes, it's the Dispo in Bay City. Once again, the same people who were suspended from operating their regulated cannabis business for 2 weeks because they allowed someone to lick the joints they packaged for sale. Now they've been hit with a second 2-week suspension for that twisted tongue action. They just had a ding from the Marijuana Regulatory Agency for putting edibles in unapproved packages, too. That product recall was announced this week, affects 10,000 chocolate medibles sold throughout the state. A court hearing was held on Wednesday for Judith Pontius, the almost 80-year-old woman from Ypsilanti Township who faces jail for her cultivation of cannabis plants at her home in defiance of local ordinances. She maintains that all 55 of her plants are for her personal medicinal use, and the court is granting an evidentiary hearing to let her prove it. The date has not yet been set. Well, and hello, Delta 8. Goodbye, Delta 8. The governor of Michigan signed a package of bills this week which align the varying definitions of cannabis and clearly identifies cannabinoids which produce a Delta 9-like effect are to be regulated by the Marijuana Regulatory Agency, and that includes Delta 8. Now, moving Delta 8 into the regulated market means it should disappear from gas station shelves in October, but that doesn't mean cannabis businesses in Michigan will be selling Delta 8 products anytime soon. Thursday morning, the regulatory agency issued a warning that Delta 8 had no approved method of extraction, and cannabis companies can begin submitting plans for a successful extraction and testing of Delta 8 product program. But that process can take months. Bottom line, Delta 8 fans in Michigan had better stock up. And that's it for the Michigan Report. I'm Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News.
Vermont may be one of the smallest states in the union, but they too are going through the growing pains of a new state with a legal adult use cannabis market. Our own green nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan, explains. Jessie Lynn?
Thanks, Jimmy. I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. In a $25 million deal, 2 Vermont medical dispensaries, Champlain Valley Dispensary and Southern Vermont Wellness, collectively known as Series Med, will merge with Slang Worldwide, a publicly traded Canadian cannabis company with operations in 12 U.S. states. With the $25 million sale of Series Med, out-of-state conglomerates will own all 3 Vermont medical cannabis licenses. Plans are already underway for a 50,000 square foot expansion and to double its workforce. All medical cannabis license holders get quite a jump start and can begin selling for adult use 5 months earlier than other Vermont retailers. Giving this advantage alongside the boost from corporate investment, many cannabis activists are worried that Vermont's adult use market is working against small craft cultivators before they even start. Vermont Growers Association, a grassroots advocacy network who's been lobbying for an equitable market, denounced the acquisition, stating that is the recipe for market saturation and entirely inappropriate for Vermont. This corporate takeover is an unhealthy direction for Vermont's cannabis markets. The Cannabis Control Board's new executive director, Bryn Hare, joins the board this month. Ms. Hare will be responsible for leading many of the board's daily business functions, developing rules and regulations, overseeing both cannabis establishments licensing and the medical registry. If you still want to celebrate 710, Hot and Heady has Hoodoo Brown barbecue sauce on the menu with the return of their monthly Stony Supper events. Check out Saturday, July 17th, all-you-can-eat summer pig roast, conscientiously crafted cannabis cuisine. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
Finally today, a story about one of our new favorite dispensaries in the greater Boston, Massachusetts area. It's Seed in Jamaica Plain. That area of Boston is one of the most diverse in the city, and on the last weekend in June, they held a Pride celebration that featured music, a drag queen contest, educational panels, and a salute to the social diversity of that area. Well, that will do it for this week's Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young for Pro Cannabis Media. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Hi, I'm Ben Schauer, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are